lying drunk near the Scotch church. Certainly there was no evidence to show that the prisoner had picked it up before the deceased entered the cab, but on the other hand there was no evidence to show that it had been picked up in the cab. It was far more likely that the glove, and especially a white glove, would be picked up under the light of a lamp near the Scotch church, where it was easily noticeable, than in the darkness of a cab, where there was very little room, and where it would be quite dark, as the blinds were drawn down. The cabman, Royston, swore positively that the man who got out of his cab on the St. Kilda road wore a diamond ring on the forefinger of his right hand, and the cabman Rankin swore to the same thing about the man who got out at Powlett Street. Against this could be placed the evidence of one of the prisoner's most intimate friends, one who had seen him almost daily for the last 5 years, and he had sworn positively that the prisoner was not in the habit of wearing rings. The cabman Rankin had also sworn that the man who entered his cab on the St. Kilda road alighted at Powlett Street, East Melbourne, at 2 o'clock on Friday morning, as he heard that hour strike from the post office clock, whereas the evidence of the prisoner's landlady showed plainly that he had entered the house 5 minutes previously, and her evidence was further supported by that of the watchmaker Dendy. Mrs. Sampson saw the hand of the kitchen clock point to 5 minutes to 2, and thinking it was 10 minutes slow, told the detective that the prisoner did not enter the house till 5 minutes past 2, which would just give the man who alighted from the cab, presuming him to have been the prisoner, sufficient time to walk up to his lodgings. The evidence of the watchmaker, Dendy, however, showed clearly that he had put the clock right at the hour of 8 on Thursday night, that it was impossible for it to gain 10 minutes before 2 on Friday morning, and therefore the time, 5 minutes to 2, seen by the landlady, was the correct one, and the prisoner was in the house 5 minutes before the other man alighted from the cab in Powlett Street. These points in themselves were sufficient to show that the prisoner was innocent, but the evidence of the woman Rawlins must prove conclusively to the jury that the prisoner was not the man who committed the crime. The witness Brown had proved that the woman Rawlins had delivered a letter to him, which he gave to the prisoner, and that the prisoner left the club to keep the appointment spoken of in the letter, which letter, or rather the remains of it, had been put in evidence. The woman Rawlins swore that the prisoner met her at the corner of Russell and Bourke Streets, and had gone with her to one of the back slums, there to see the writer of the letter. She also proved that at the time of the committal of the crime the prisoner was still in the back slum, by the bed of the dying woman, and, there being only one door to the room, he could not possibly have left without the witness seeing him. The woman Rawlins further proved that she left the prisoner at the corner of Bourke and Russell Streets at 25 minutes to 2 o'clock, which was 5 minutes before Royston drove his cab up to the St. Kilda police station, with the dead body inside. Finally, the woman Rawlins proved her words by stating that she saw both the post office and town hall clocks, and supposing the prisoner started from the corner of Bourke and Russell Streets, as she says he did, he would reach East Melbourne in 20 minutes, which made it 5 minutes to 2 on Friday morning, the time at which, according to the landlady's statement, he entered the house. All the evidence given by the different witnesses agreed completely, and formed a chain which showed the whole of the prisoner's movements at the time of the committal of the murder. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible that the murder could have been committed by the man in the dock. The strongest piece of evidence brought forward by the prosecution was that of the witness, Hableton, who swore that the prisoner used threats against the life of the deceased. But the language used was merely the outcome of a passionate Irish nature, and was not sufficient to prove the crime to have been committed by the prisoner. The defence which the prisoner set up was that of an alibi, and the evidence of the witnesses for the defence proved conclusively that the prisoner could not, and did not, commit the murder. Finally, Calton wound up his elaborate and exhaustive speech, which lasted for over 2 hours, by a brilliant peroration, calling upon the jury to base their verdict upon the plain facts of the case, and if they did so they could hardly fail in bringing in a verdict of not guilty. When Calton sat down, a subdued murmur of applause was heard, which was instantly suppressed, and the judge began to sum up, strongly in favour of Fitzgerald. The jury then retired, and immediately there was a dead silence in the crowded court, an unnatural silence, such as must have fallen on the blood-loving Roman populace when they saw the Christian martyrs kneeling on the hot yellow sands of the arena, and watched the long, lithe forms of the lion and panther creeping steadily towards their prey. The hour being late, the gas had been lighted, and there was a sickly glare through the wide hall. Fitzgerald had been taken out of court on the retiring of the jury, but the spectators stared steadily at the empty dock, which seemed to enchain them by some indescribable fascination. They conversed among themselves only in whispers, until even the whispering ceased, and nothing could be heard but the steady ticking of the clock, and now and then the quick-drawn breath of some timid onlooker. Suddenly a woman, whose nerves were overstrung, shrieked, and the cry rang weirdly through the crowded hall. She was taken out, and again there was silence, every eye being fixed on the door through which the jury would reissue with their verdict of life or death. The hands of the clock moved slowly round, a quarter, a half, 3/4, and then the hour sounded with a silvery ring which startled every one. Madge, sitting with her hands tightly clasped together, began to fear that her highly strung nerves would give way. "My God!" she muttered softly to herself, "will this suspense never end?" Just then the door opened, and the jury re-entered. The prisoner was again placed in the dock, and the judge resumed his seat, this time with the black cap in his pocket, as every one guessed. The usual formalities were gone through, and when the foreman of the jury stood up every neck was craned forward, and every ear was on the alert to catch the words that fell from his lips. The prisoner flushed a little and then grew pale as death, giving a quick, nervous glance at the quiet figure in black, of which he could just catch a glimpse. Then came the verdict, sharp and decisive, "Not guilty." On hearing this a cheer went up from every one in the court, so strong was the sympathy with Brian. In vain the crier of the court yelled "Order!" until he was red in the face. In vain the judge threatened to commit all present for contempt of court. His voice being inaudible, it did not matter much. The enthusiasm could not be restrained, and it was 5 minutes before order was obtained. The judge, having recovered his composure, delivered his judgment, and discharged the prisoner, in accordance with the verdict. Calton had won many cases, but it is questionable if he had ever heard a verdict which gave him so much satisfaction as that which proclaimed Fitzgerald innocent. And Brian, stepping down from the dock a free man, passed through a crowd of congratulating friends to a small room off the court, where a woman was waiting for him, a woman who clung round his neck and sobbed out, my darling, I knew that God would save you." End of chapter 19. Read by Sabella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.